All right, Mr. Mayor, we're just going to bring the waiting room live and we'll be all set in just a few seconds.
Okay, just tell me when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we do have our attendees into the meeting.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome the members of council, staff, and members of the public to our February 26th council meeting and call this meeting to order. I'd like to ask Mrs. Pearson for the roll, or sorry, for the disclaimer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this meeting is being recorded this evening and will be uploaded to the town's YouTube. At this time, we just want to remind everyone that the opinions expressed during the meeting are not the official decisions of council, only the record and the minutes serve as the official decision of council and will be posted after the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. At this time, I'd like to ask you to perform the roll call, please.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Hyatt.
Present.
Councillor Field.
Present.
Councillor O'Hara. Councillor Patel.
Present.
Councillor Welsh.
Present.
Mayor Loosely.
Present.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask council regarding the declaration of a pecuniary interest. I would like to request that council declare a conflict of interest now or at the appropriate time and fill out the necessary paperwork for the clerk. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda, I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Hyatt. Any discussion regarding that agenda before you? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the minutes, we have a number of minutes. I'd like to ask council for a mover and a seconder for a regular council meeting held on February the 13th. So I'll ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Welsh. Any discussion regarding those minutes of February 13th, errors or omissions? If not, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries. Next on the agenda is the council education session minutes. And I'll ask, and that was on February the 13th. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that motion on the floor for discussion, please. Councillor Hyatt, seconded by Councillor Clark. Any discussion regarding those minutes? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. And we have the review and the adoption of the minutes of a special council meeting regarding our budget on the 13th of February. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put those minutes on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Clark. Any discussion regarding those minutes? All those in favor of approving those minutes? Opposed? That motion carries. That now brings us to the inspirational message. And I'll ask Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you. Through your worship. Never regret a day in your life. Good days give you happiness. Bad days give you experience. Worst days give you lessons. And best days give you memories.
Oh, I like that. Thank you, Councillor Patel. Well done.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the council roundtable announcements. And as you know, I rotated this week. This time we'll start with Councillor Welsh, please.
I have nothing at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
I have nothing as well.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things, and maybe I'll mention the first one. It looks like Councillor O'Hara is in the gallery. If he can be brought in, it looks like he's on there, but my roundtable item was Family Day. I just wanted to congratulate all the staff and volunteers that made Family Day so good for Petrolia. We had a lot of different organizations doing a lot of different things. It was a very busy days over the course of the weekend. So I just wanted to congratulate everybody on a very successful event. So.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Councillor Hyatt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just like to say that last week I took the Essentials of Municipal Fire Protection training to help kind of enhance my skills for Petrolia North and Enniskillen Fire Department Committee. Thank you.
Glad to hear it. Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Nothing at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you. And Councillor O'Hara, do you have anything you'd like to report regarding the round table? I see you're on.
Oh, I'm in there now. No, I don't, not tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a few items. I just want to mention I attended a picture on Tuesday, February the 14th with 3 long-term sponsorship individuals that contributed to the new Olympia ice resurfacing machine at the Greenwood Recreation Center. I was thrilled that the staff renewed the agreements and arranged for their graphics to be placed on the machine. Special thanks to Mrs. Janice McMichaels-Dennis, President and CEO of Blue Water Power Group of Companies, Mr. Chris Curry, President of Daymar Security Systems, Mrs. Wendy Loosley, President of Margaret Stokes IODE, and Joanne Brand, Treasurer of the IODE, for their contribution. Special thanks to Mr. Dave Menzies, Director of Parks, Recreation and Facilities, and Mrs. Larissa Ellsworth, Director of Marketing, Arts, and Communication, for arranging this event. I also attended a full county council meeting and county committee meeting held on Wednesday, February the 15th, and I will continue to keep council informed. And as you're probably aware, we are meeting this Wednesday. Special thanks to Mrs. Larissa Ellsworth, Director of Marketing, Arts, and Communication, Mr. Dave Menzies, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Facilities, all the town staff, service clubs, organizations, sponsors, and volunteers that took part in the Petrolia Family Fun Days that I feel was a great success. Congratulations to Mr. Larry Lackey on being awarded the Volunteer of the Year 2022 Community Partner, and Mr. Terry Sire, Volunteer of the Year 2022 Community Service. The third recognition for someone that could not be present will be announced at a later date. Special thanks to Mr. Dave Menzies, who emceed the program, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Facilities, Mrs. Larissa Ellsworth, Director of Marks, Arts, and Communication, Mrs. Tara Wagner, Marketing and Special Events Associate, and all those involved with organizing the event, to say thank you to all our volunteers. Councillor Joel Field, Councillor Bill Clark, and Mrs. Mandy Pearson, Clerk Operations Clerk, were also in attendance. This was a wonderful event enjoyed by all. That's all I have. Thank you. Moving on in the agenda, we do have the update where I asked for the different members sitting on the different committees to give a verbal report and then to approve the minutes if necessary. First on tonight is the Community Health and Wellness Advisory Committee. And please note those minutes were corrected. And the council members that are appointed to that are Councillor Deb Patel and Councillor Bill Clark. I guess I'd like to ask which one of you would like to start it off. Bill, go ahead.
I was actually just going to say if Deb wanted to, she was more than welcome. I have the trail stuff to report as well later, so.
Okay, this is Councillor Patel. Would you go ahead, please?
No problem. Thank you, through you, Your Worship. It was a great first meeting. There was a good attendance. Just a quick summary of the meeting. We did change the meeting time from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. I did bring forth to Health and Wellness my desire to create a youth summit that would be held in more of a job trades fair style format for the fall of 2024. I've also brought forth and shared with council the draft copy of a trifold flyer brochure that is currently titled Youth on the Go, which would offer 3 different categories of age groups that would identify all activities in Petrolia offered to these youth defined in these age groups. That would be very simplistic for the community to identify what activities are available, be able to contact each individually, and all the advertising would be in one very simple format to move forward with. With that being said, there are some formalities that are going to be moving forward in the near future with council's approval, which would include a public announcement that would allow the community to weigh in, all the service groups and the public to be aware of what's planned and hopefully find some support and encouragement as this endeavor moves forward.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. And I was at that meeting as well, and I believe our CAO was there as well. That was a great meeting. There's 2 things we have on the agenda. I'd like to approve the minutes first, and then there's another recommendation we'll deal with separately. So I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder to deal with the minutes of the meeting of January the 16th. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Hyatt. Any discussion regarding those minutes? And they are the minutes of the Community Health and Wellness Advisory Committee. There's no questions. I'll call the vote. All those in favor of approving those minutes? Opposed? That motion carries. And we also have another recommended resolution before you. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor for discussion. Moved by Councillor Patel, seconded by Councillor Welsh. And I'll try and remember this time. I keep forgetting. Can I have Mrs. Pearson, would you read that motion, please?
Not a problem, Your Worship. And that motion is that the Council of the Town of Petrolia approve the Community Health and Wellness Advisory Committee to host a youth summit in Petrolia.
Thank you. Any discussion regarding that motion before you? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. That moves us on to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. We have committee members, Councillor Bill Clark and Councillor Chad Hyatt. And which one of you gentlemen would like to give a verbal report, and then we'll look at approving the minutes. Councillor Hyatt, go ahead.
Yeah, it was my first introduction to the Parks and Rec Committee. So, I think it looks like a great working committee. It looks like there's great involvement from youth members to more experienced members, I would say, in the committee. But I think it's going to be a very enjoyable committee to be working on. We went through some, a new chair was appointed. So Mr. Ross Ellingsworth will be the new chair for the Parks and Rec Committee. We appointed some chairs for some of the other new subcommittees, trails, the recreation project was on the agenda for discussion. Kind of one of the highlights that was talked about was just, going along with the sidewalk project that we've had, or the sidewalk presentation, just going to be about accessibility to get to the new recreation project once it's built at the YMCA. But so that was brought up as one of the concerns from the members. But I'm sure more information will be coming as we progress. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hyatt. Councillor Clark, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think Councillor Hyatt covered most of it. The only other thing, I guess, is, planning events leading up to the Petrolia 150 and the events coming forward for the rest of 2023, obviously.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Now, we do have a motion before you regarding the adoption of the minutes of February the 1st. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Hyatt. Any discussion? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Any discussion from council? If not, Mrs. Pearson, please read that motion.
And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to endorse the presented minutes of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting held on February 1st, 2023.
All those in favor of approving those minutes? Opposed? That motion carries. Next is the Petrolia Heritage Advisory Committee. Our committee member on that is Councillor Liz Wells. and I believe Councillor Joel Field as well. Which one of you two would like to start it off? Councillor Welsh, go ahead.
Hi there. We are very excited to welcome 2 new members to the Heritage Committee, and they are keen to dig right in and help us. And we are working on planning a few special events for Petrolia 150. So everyone stay tuned for that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Welsh. Now, we do have a motion before you. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that motion on the floor for discussion. Moved by Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Patel. I will ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that is for the council of the town of Petrolia to endorse as presented minutes of the Petrolia Heritage Advisory Committee meeting held on February 1st, 2023.
Any further discussion regarding those minutes? If not, all those in favor of those minutes? Opposed? That motion carries. That takes us now to the Petrolia North Enniskillen Fire Committee. Our committee members are Councillor Hyatt and Councillor O'Hara. I'll ask which one of you gentlemen would like to lead off with the verbal report first. Councillor O'Hara, I can't hear you. Sorry, I think you're muted. Yeah, I believe you're still muted. There you go. Guys. Councillor Hyatt, you want to take a stab at it? Just a report.
Sure, I can,
Okay.
I'll fill in here while Ross works on the microphone.
Okay, thank you.
Also, introduction, first experience with the Petrolia North Enniskillen Fire Department Committee. Seems like a very welcoming committee. It seems like we have very knowledgeable fire chief and deputy clerks for this committee. We did go through an agenda motion where we have reduced to elected officials that are voting on the subject matter of this committee, as opposed to including the fire chief and deputy clerks as part of the voting members for this committee. So now will be the voting members from council, elected officials only. We looked at the budget that was presented by the fire chief. We also reviewed his annual report, which was also similar presented in council meeting 2 weeks ago in Petrolia Town Council. So overall, I think, it seems like there's a very good working relationship between Petrolia and Enniskillen related to the fire department. So I look forward to this as we progress further.
Thank you, Councillor Hyatt. Councillor O'Hara, can you hear me? Would you like to?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think a big thing that we're looking at is a new tanker truck for Petrolia and Enniskillen this year. And I believe we have a meeting tomorrow night on that issue.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. And we do have 2 minutes from the fire committee to be aware of. I think we can deal with them both together, and that is the July 7th meeting and the January 10th. So I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Hyatt, seconded by Councillor Clark. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please. Mrs. Pearson, are you there?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I think I was just being trumped by another unmute, so I apologize. I think we got that figured out. So that is for the council of the town of Petrolia to receive as information minutes of the Petrolia North Enniskillen Fire Committee meeting held on July 22nd, 2022 and January 10th, 2023, sorry.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. Any questions from council regarding those 2 sets of minutes? If not, all those in favor of approving those minutes? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Next on our list is the Lambton Trails, and our appointed member is Councillor Bill Clark. Would you like to give us a short verbal report, please?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I touched briefly on this at the last meeting, but basically my first meeting meeting, I guess, with this group. Same as every of the other committees, new leadership, new chair, new secretary, those type of things took place. And they had a guest speaker. Kendall Ross was there and spoke about the Blue Water Grand Fondo. Not sure if everyone's aware, but this bicycle race has raised over $350,000 to Blue Water Health, to the palliative care unit, to the hospice, and a little lesser funds to Big Sisters of Sarnia Lambton. So yeah, big year ahead of meetings, and I guess lots to learn.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And yeah, that's a great fundraiser. Wow. All right.
And I did provide Mandy with a copy of the meeting minutes, but a little late for today's agenda.
All right, but we do have a motion before you regarding just to approve your verbal report. So I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor for discussion, please. Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Hyatt. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
Thank you. And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to receive and file Councillor Clark's verbal update on the Lambton Trails meeting held in January of 2023.
Any questions from council regarding that verbal update? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to municipal services and traffic. We have our liaison member is Councillor Hyatt, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items listed. Do you have a brief report, Councillor Hyatt, before we approve the happenings?
Yep, thank you. I did meet with the Director of Operations and Mandy regarding this position. I think maybe I would like to sit down with you yourself there, your worship, and then maybe understand what are some of the goals, objectives, and expectations of this liaison position. I do believe that the Director of Operation provides council with reports on what's happening, what budget items, what needs to be approved in a timely manner as we're having council meetings. So I just really want to understand what it specifically is required from said liaison position.
Yeah, I'd be more than pleased to sit down with you and explain what I would like you to do. And
Absolutely.
again, that would be, I'll certainly do that. All
Thank
right,
you.
there's a motion before you. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to adopt that verbal report. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Patel. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to receive and file Councillor Hyatt's verbal update on municipal services happenings.
Any questions from council? If not, all those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries. All right, that brings us to the planning and development. This is not a committee of council, but our liaison members are Councillor Field and Councillor O'Hara. I'll ask which one of you two gentlemen would like to lead this off, or at least give us a verbal report.
You want me to take it, Ross? Shake your head. Yes. Okay.
Field, go
Yeah,
ahead.
we have a lot of exciting developments coming forward. A lot of them are in different stages. You know, we have people that are coming before us with proposals for you know, different housing and as well as subdivisions. So they're in different stages. They're at different points where we can release information, but it's still positive with many of the subdivisions moving forward. Just working through items with staff and county and getting everybody with their stuff in a row. So it's just exciting stuff that will be coming to Petrolia. It's hard to talk about each one of them, but they are moving forward, many of them. So.
Thank you, Councillor Field, but it's just nice to get that verbal update. Councillor O'Hara, do you have anything you'd like to add? Yeah, okay. We're still having some trouble, but thank you. I read your lip. Moving on to number 10, correspondence for information. I'd like to request that council consider adopting a motion to take B to G and then deal with A separately.
And your worship, I just didn't know if we could get a motion to receive and file council's update on planning and development happenings. Would that be possible?
Absolutely. Would you like to read that, please?
Thank you. And that would be for the council of the town of Petrolia to receive and file council's update on planning and development happenings.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson, for reminding me. Any questions from council? All those in favor?
I just
Opposed?
need a mover and second, your worship. I apologize for that.
Okay, but everyone is in favor, so that's fine. Thank you. So moving back to correspondence, I'd like to request that council consider a motion to receive and file B to G. And we'll deal with A separately if that's okay. So I'd like to ask for a motion moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Patel. Any discussion regarding those correspondence items B to G? Oh, Councillor Hyatt.
Thank you, your worship. I just have, one thing that I maybe think we should consider bringing out from item number G, which is the AMO watch file.
Would you like to deal with that separately?
Yeah, I don't know if we deal with it separately or maybe it's just something that we bring forward maybe at a next council meeting. So there is a resolution template regarding homelessness in the province of Ontario.
All right, we'll deal with that separate. So we will
Okay.
go B to F, if that's okay with council. All right, any further discussion? I'll have the clerk read that motion, please.
Thank you, your worship. And that is for the council of the town of Petrolia to receive and file correspondence items 11B through F.
Yeah, that
And
would be
your worship,
10B.
actually, your worship, because we had to make a amendment to the items this evening to put the electronic format, our order of business is slightly shifted. So that number becomes 11. It reflects as 11.
All right, that's fine. So we're looking at B to F. Any discussion on those items? All those in favor of receiving and file those? Opposed? That motion carries. So we'll deal with A first. I'd like to get a motion on the floor for discussion regarding A. Moved by Councillor Hyatt, it's you, and seconded by Councillor Welsh. Any discussion regarding that letter of resolution regarding the voters list? If not, all those in favor of approving that? Opposed? That motion carries. And we'll move on to G. I'll turn it over to Councillor Hyatt first, just to see exactly what you'd like to do before we prepare a motion. So go ahead, Councillor Hyatt.
Thank you, your worship. So in that AMO watch file report, there was a resolution template that was provided that's been requesting all municipalities in the province of Ontario to send said draft resolution to Premier Doug Ford regarding homelessness in the province. So I would like to bring forward a motion that the town of Petrolia supports sending this resolution forward.
Okay, thank you. I'll need a seconder. Councillor Field, thank you. So I'll ask the clerk to read that motion and then I'll call the vote.
Just establishing that, your worship.
Okay.
And Councillor Hyatt, under that, was that the region of York? Is that correct?
It's item G, AMO watch file.
Correct. But inside that watch file, there's several items that have been brought forward. I'm just looking to find that resolution. Was that through a specific municipality?
I do not believe it was through a municipality.
Okay.
It's under the AMO Matters tab on that newsletter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the bottom
Yeah.
of the first page.
Or the resolution. Perfect. Thank
Right,
you.
right.
Yeah, that's what I was just very perfect. Okay, so I'll just be one quick second here.
No, that's fine. Take your time.
Okay. Perfect. So this is for a call to provincial government to end homelessness in Ontario. Addressed to the attention of Premier Doug Ford. Please be advised that the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia, at its meeting held on February 27th, 2023, adopted the following. Whereas the homeless crisis is taking a devastating toll on families and communities, undermining a healthy and prosperous Ontario. Whereas the homelessness crisis is the result of the underinvestment and poor policy choices of successful provincial governments. Whereas homelessness requires a range of housing, social service, and health solutions from government. Whereas homelessness is felt most at the level of local government and the residents that they serve. Whereas municipalities and district school administration boards are doing their part, but do not have the resources, capacity, or tools to address this complex challenge. And whereas leadership and urgent action is needed from the provincial government on an emergency basis to develop, resource, and implement a comprehensive plan to prevent, reduce, and ultimately end homelessness in Ontario. Therefore, be it resolved that the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia calls on the provincial government urgently, A, acknowledge that homelessness in Ontario is a social, economic, and health crisis. B, commit to ending homelessness in Ontario. C, work with AMO and a broad range of community, health, Indigenous, and economic partners to develop, resource, and implement an action plan to achieve this goal. And further, that a copy of this motion be sent to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, the Minister of Health, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
Well done. Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. Okay, any discussion from council regarding that motion?
And your worship, I apologize. As I was trying to find that link, I did miss a seconder. I have Councillor Hyatt as the mover, but I did miss a seconder. I apologize.
Who is, I think it was Councillor Patel.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion regarding that motion? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Hara. I can't hear you, Councillor O'Hara. You're not coming through. You're still muted.
Second.
There you go.
Okay, it's a sad thing in a country that is wealthy as our country that we have people living on the streets. Even in Petrolia, we have people living on the streets. It breaks my heart to think that people have to live in the cold, sleep in the cold, and so forth. But I don't think that the provincial government can solve all the problems. I think it comes back to maybe municipal, all kinds of places that have to get in there and help out to solve this problem, because I just can't believe it's happening in our community and the province of Ontario.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. I know the county is also dealing with this as well. Any further discussion from council? All those in favor of approving that motion? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. The next item is correspondence for consideration. We have none at this time. That brings us to, we have 3 delegations. Our first one is BM Ross Development Charges Study. And we have Mr. Matt Pearson from BM Ross for a brief report.
Perfect. So your worship, before we begin the presentation from BM Ross, if you can just give me one quick moment, I will bring Mr. Pearson forward and give you an all clear when that's occurred.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Pearson is in the panel, your worship.
Thank you. Mr. Pearson, can you hear me?
I can so, your worship.
Great. I want to welcome you to addressing council at this time. I know we had to make a last minute change to do a Zoom meeting, but I appreciate your cooperation and coming here to give us a brief report. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Excellent. Mandy, do I have control of the presentation?
It is our understanding you should have, but if we encounter technical difficulties, we have a backup.
Okay, how do we get it up there then?
Just share screen.
Just a second. There it is. Okay, and well, I've got it here on my screen. I can share.
We don't have it on our screen as yet.
How's that?
Here we come. Yep, here it
Okay.
is. Yeah, we have it.
Excellent. Well, hello, Your Worship and Council. I'm glad to be here tonight. I understand that you're going to be considering a motion later in your agenda to implement a development charge study. And I was asked to come here by the CEO then to give you a short presentation on what development charges are. I was at council in November of 2021 by Zoom, and when you were considering the same, and we went through a development charges 101 tutorial. And I understand that quite a few council members have changed in the last election, so they won't have added been able to know that. So this won't be in depth. It won't go into the weeds. It's just going to give you a little knowledge of what development charges are. So development charges are a tool, and they're available to municipalities to recover capital costs associated with infrastructure and services they put in to benefit growth. This tool was given to municipalities by the province over 30 years ago now. And back in the day when the province was trying to get municipalities to be more self-sufficient and recover monies in different places. So there's a long history of development charges in Ontario, not in Petrolia. So the general idea, was that growth pays for its share. As you probably know, listening to municipal news through November and December, the province stepped in and changed some of that, and it's not 100% now. But the idea is that development pays for things that you put in place so they can develop. So this is not, and I just want to stress, it's not about operating or maintenance, it's just about capital. So development charges are collected from new residential and non-residential development. You can't collect them from existing development, people that are there now. They're calculated based on a capital works plan that's set out in a background study. The background study has to be done and has to be relatively current in order for you to pass the development charge bylaw. There's lots of rules around this. There's an act, there's regulations, and then you set out how these are calculated, what you can collect for. And it's a bit of a mix of accounting, planning, and engineering. And the money you collect must go towards development charge projects. So it's not just a new bank account or a new treasure chest. Through the development charge process and doing the background report, we come up with numbers that you could charge as a development charge, but you ultimately set that number. You can't set it higher than we can support, but you can set it lower, and that's been done before. So when do they come into play? Well, when you build a new house on a vacant lot, or you build a new subdivision, or you put a new office building in, or you convert buildings into new uses. But there's also places where you can't charge a development charge. If somebody puts an addition on their house, they're allowed to do that. Changing a cottage to a home, replacing an existing house with a new house, say there was a fire. There's usually a rule of about 5 years to replace that house without incurring a development charge. And that's because those type of things already had services. You're not giving them anything new. Now that's not exhaustive, but that's some examples. Under the Act, you can't collect for an enlargement of a building. You can't collect for additional units in some sort of prescribed residential buildings. And these are all bureaucratic words, but some of the things, like if somebody puts a second unit into their house, they're allowed to do that without incurring a development charge. Recently, we've got some more rules put down by the province in December. You can get second or third buildings on your lot and not incur a development charge. Nonprofit housing now is exempt from development charges. You can also put your own exemptions in the bylaw. I've seen municipalities exempt nursing homes, things like that, things that are good for the municipality. And they'll get asked, you know, to exempt those. How do we do that? Well, we figure out what costs are created by the capital works that you put into play. So, and then we parse out what's caused by residential and what benefits non-residential or industrial. In the past, lots of municipalities foregone charging industrial and commercial and institutional and just charge residential for development charges. Some of the thinking was then, you know, if you didn't charge it, somebody might put an industry or a business into your community, and that's good for everybody. But it does, somebody has to pay for their share of it, and then it goes back to your tax base. Right now, you don't have a development charge, so everything that you do comes out of your tax base. Typically, we charge on a unit, so a single family home, a townhouse. The charge would be less for an apartment because there's less usage, and there's sort of standard industry percentages that we use for that. Non-residential typically charged on the square foot. This last part of this slide where they talk about specific benefiting areas doesn't apply to you because you are one town and you don't have, after amalgamation, many of the municipalities in Ontario compose rural and urban segments. So we might have a sewage plant in a town and no sewers in the country. So you didn't charge things that happen in the country for like a sewage system. Doesn't apply to you. Keep going the wrong way. Overview DCs. They're reflective of projects being undertaken to service growth. So what happens in your municipality is different than what happens in another municipality and another municipality. So you can't compare what their development charge is to you because it's about the services they put in for and need to put in for their development as opposed to you. So often municipalities at this stage of the game, people want to, well, what's the other municipality collect next door to us? And it's just a number. It means nothing to you because they would have put different things in. I mean, it's interesting to note the range of them and what people are putting in, but it really doesn't have any bearing on what you do. 30 years ago, municipalities would look at those numbers and go, wow, we got to be competitive. We got to be cheaper than the guy next door. And then all they found out was they were giving away money essentially because they weren't covering their costs. Generally, the more growth projects you have, the higher the DCs are. In municipalities that do sort of new sewage or new water projects, big ones, their development charges will be higher. If you've got a situation where you've got a water plant and a sewage plant that's been in there for years, had lots of capacity in it, then you're not having to collect a development charge there. And I have a municipality right now that we're redoing their development charge after 2 years because they're going to put in an enlargement to their sewage plant, and their development charges are going to go up by like $20,000 to pay for development to pay for that plant, so the existing taxpayer doesn't. The other thing that's really interesting, development charges in a municipality like yours, is that you can only collect for the portion of the project that benefits future growth. You're not likely to do too many capital projects that just benefit development. You know, you're probably going to do it that the existing populace shares in whatever you do. If you did something at the arena and added something onto it, made it bigger and better, part of that will be charged back to the existing populace because they're using it already. And you collect pieces of it from the development industry. And you'll do that with a whole bunch of projects. All those pieces add up. I've said there's lots of rules around this. They tell you how you got to calculate it, how you parse it out. There is a requirement for a background study to support the bylaw. Used to be only have a life of 5 years. In December, the rules changed under Bill 23, and they actually can have a life of 10 years. So every 5 years, you were going back in municipalities and looking at their projects and looking at the collection. Actually, it wasn't a bad time frame because some of the projects don't get done and aren't going to get done. You know, council changes their mind, things change. So 10 years might be a little long in the tooth for that, but right now that's what it is. And then there's lots of reporting requirements for your treasurer because there's a lot of transparency of where this money gets collected from and where it goes in the end. As I say, this was put into place in 1989. It's been amended many times since then, and it was just recently amended by the More Homes Built Faster Act. And I guess my opinion on that is it wasn't amended in a good way for the municipalities. They took away some of the things you were getting out of this. Types of projects that are eligible are all the hard capital works, water, wastewater, stormwater, roads, waste diversion, fire protection, library, parks and recreation, some things, some childcare, and then there were other things that were eligible up till December, and they've taken them out now. So resurfacing an asphalt road, just maintenance in a town, that's not eligible. Replacing a fire truck with a newer fire truck isn't eligible. If you replace it with a fire truck that's bigger and has maybe a whole bunch of things that are legislated now, and you might get a piece of that fire truck. And I heard you talking that you share fire services with Enniskillen, but there's talk of buying a new truck. Maybe a piece of that might be eligible for you to get development charges from. If you replace pumps at a sewage pumping station with the same size pumps, just because they wore out after 25 years, that's not eligible. Put bigger pumps in though to handle more development, that's eligible. And so we go through all the projects with your staff and develop a capital works list that you want to collect for. As I said, these expire automatically after 10 years. You haven't got one yet. We undertake a background study. We look at future growth. We do sort of a forecast of that because it sort of ties in. You're not going to do things for development if you're not going to have any development. And for many, many years, a lot of smaller municipalities in our end of Ontario didn't have a lot of growth. And as you know, that growth started about 5 years ago, and it's been far more than we ever had before. So we look at the projects in places that already had development charges. I said we sometimes take out old projects that we've collected all the money for, or we're not going to do, and we add new ones and review the costs. And we calculate a DC for each project. We have to make that available for 60 days prior to bylaw passage. Again, I said, council sets the charge. So we present a report to you with supporting information for a charge of say $10,000. You don't have to charge $10,000. You can charge 6 or 7 or 8, but you can't charge 11. And then we do a bylaw. So there's a process going on here. You have to have a public meeting, get feedback, and you pass a bylaw in the end. So there's a process. It gets time heavy at the end. It probably would take a year to go through this. Because at the end, as you notice, we're looking at 2 to 3 months just in sort of bureaucracy at the end. But we've got to develop those projects. Your staff are going to have to come up with projects. They may not all be at this stage in the game in Petrolia. They might not be fleshed out yet. You might not have costs that you're going to spend on something. And I'm thinking of a couple of your projects that I know about. So it really comes down to we forecast future growth and development. We look at history too. Are you going to keep that growth up? You're going to continue. I heard a planning report here tonight where there's some things going on with potential new developments in Petrolia, and that's a good thing. So what do so you've got that, you're going to need it. What are you going to have to build to make that happen? And who's going to pay for that? You forecast the capital needs to service that then. We determine a net cost. We have to take grants off. If you get a grant, you got to share it with the development industry. And then we subtract the portion of the cost attributable to the existing population. And you will find down the line that we're getting pieces of a whole bunch of projects. These are mostly collected on the issuance of a building permit, and there's a couple of other triggers you can put into your bylaw. But what has happened is we used to collect them. Somebody would come to you with a draft plan of subdivision, and you say, "Well, I want you to pay all the hard services development charges up front," which could be considerable. And the developer is going, "Oh, I can't afford to do that right now." So there were deals being made. It sort of evolved to when there's a building permit, you collect your development charge. In the end, the development charge is paid by, as it filters down, the person that owns that home. The builder may be the one paying it, the developer probably isn't. But in the end, it's the person that owns that home, and it's a cost of part of that home. You're required to take that money and put separate reserves up for each of them and keep track of it and keep track of where it goes. And that became apparent in this Bill 23. It seemed the government thought that wasn't being done. And they really wanted some rules in about allocating this money. And what they were finding is municipalities, and I work for quite a few small municipalities that have this, they do accumulate hundreds of thousands of dollars in a reserve because they're collecting it because they're going to build a project in year 8 that costs $5 million. So they start collecting it at year 0 and collect it. And by the time they get there, they may have a few $100,000, but it's allocated. They're going to spend it on that project. If they don't, there's rules about that too. Recent changes you heard about, there was a lot of hubbub, AMO, Roma, everybody was getting asking you to write letters and complain. And all the municipalities I work for did, and it got them nowhere. So this was pretty much premeditated. So third dwelling units. So you're bringing essentially another house or another apartment onto a property. They're benefiting from the services that are in place, but they're not having to pay for any expansion. Because what's happening is that will eat at your capacity. If you have 15 units of capacity and 3 of these went in, they're sort of taking away for that 15, but they're not paying anything. Eventually, you're going to have 0 and have to replace that.
Excuse me for interrupting, Mr. Pearson, your time is running out. Can you wrap this up, please?
I think I'm on like the second last slide, Your Honor.
Thank you.
There's exemptions for a whole lot of things: affordable housing, attainable housing, nonprofit housing. You're no longer collect for. You no longer can collect for studies. And there's a bunch of phasing costs where you're not allowed to collect the full amount for the first 5 years. They don't mean anything to you right now, but when you pass a bylaw, it will mean something to you. There you go. So it was a short tutorial. We would normally give a longer one if we're doing a study. This is the second time some of you have seen this, so I tried to parse it down a bit. But development charges are an important tool for a municipality to collect money. You did 19
Thank you,
units
Mr.
last
Pearson.
year.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. I will open it up briefly to questions. As council is aware, they already have a copy of this, and we will be dealing with this separately on the agenda. But is there any questions for Mr. Pearson from council, please? And Mandy, can you put the screen back up with all the members of, thank you. Does any councilors have any questions? Councillor Field.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Great, thank you very much. This is the second time I've seen this, and still got some information out of it. My question is, if we endorse this and proceeded with it up to a year, do you have a rough idea of when we would see a final report?
Mr. Pearson, can you address that, please?
Yeah, I would think it would be at least 8 months, council, to get to that stage. It depends on what shape your capital works forecast is in right now. If the projects are developed enough that you can put a cost onto them.
Thank you. Councillor Field, go ahead.
So basically, we could, if we proceeded, we could have the information to prepare for budget at the end of this year.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Councillor O'Hara, go ahead. You're muted again, Councillor O'Hara. I can't hear you.
Okay,
Yeah, I can't see you, but I can hear you. Go ahead.
but you can't see me. Anyway, a question is, you probably covered this, but I maybe just missed it. And I've heard the presentation before also. But if we did this and a new subdivision is already approved, then would those development charges still apply to every lot when they got a building permit?
Mr. Pearson, can you address that, please?
Yes, then whether the subdivision is approved or not, these don't get applied until the building permit stage, which could be 3 or 4 years down the road for some of them. So As long as you've got a bylaw in place, when the building permit's applied for, you can collect a development charge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hyatt?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. First time for me to see this presentation material, so thank you. My question is that the initial study costs XXX dollars. In 10 years from now, we're required to redo the study. Is the second study the same cost as the initial study, or is it a percentage of said cost? Thank
Mr.
you.
Pearson, can you address that, please?
Sure can. You're going to have to flesh out all the same information with 10 years of inflation on it, so it won't be the same.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councillor Patel?
Yes, thank you, through you, your worship. You alluded that there had been several changes through Bill 23 and a lot of different moving parts to this, and that your feelings were that it wasn't in favor of the municipality. Do we know that these changes have now stopped, or can we, is there any forecast to any other changes that are coming forward, and what that timeframe look like?
Councillor Pearson, can you address that, please?
And we have no forecast of whether they'll change things again. I think that some of the changes caught municipalities by surprise, especially the one where during the first 5 years, the charges are phased in. That wasn't there before. So in the first year of this, you can only charge 80% of whatever the bylaw says. So you're short 20%, which then goes back on the existing populace. Nobody forecasted that was going to happen. They put a lot of changes in right now. It's part of growing Ontario, they think, as a province. And so you have to live with them, right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara? Councillor O'Hara, I can't hear you. Sorry. No, still nothing. I think because our time's been allotted, I think we should probably move on. I want to just say, Mr. Pearson, thank you for addressing council and making this change for a Zoom meeting at the last minute. And as you know, this will be dealt with later on the agenda.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thank
So
you,
we'll move
Council.
on. Okay, we'll move on to our second item. We have Mr. Andrew Meyer, General Manager of the Cultural Services Division. I'll ask Mandy if you can bring the individual forward, please.
We should be all set, your worship.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer, can you hear me okay?
I can, your worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, welcome. It's nice to have you coming, and we're sorry for this last minute change due to the weather, but we certainly appreciate you helping to make this work. So I'll turn the meeting over to you. Go ahead.
It's my pleasure. No problem at all. Your worship, Mayor Loosely, and members of council, thank you for having us this evening. I've just shared my screen, and if I could get a thumbs up just to acknowledge that that is coming through on your end, sir.
Yep, it's
Thank you,
okay.
your worship. Great. So again, thank you for having us this evening. As many of you may be aware from the presentation materials that were included in your package, the County of Lambton undertook a joint library facilities review in collaboration with our municipal partners last year. The study was funded through the Municipal Modernization Fund. And the presentation that you have before you this evening is actually a presentation that was delivered by our consultant, Anand Desai, who is with Monteith Brown Planning Consultants and was partnered with MJMJ Architects to review the 25 libraries across the county library system. This presentation was brought before County Council on January 18th. And subsequently, council directed that the presentation go to our local municipal partners. So that's why we're here this evening. So appreciate your time. The full study, this is just a summary. The full study is a 226-page document. It is available on the county council package and on the county website, but I'll try to do a high-level summary and talk about the unique circumstance with the Petrolia Library, which really did have a shining review through this process, and we're quite proud of what's been accomplished in collaboration with your staff. So first, just to touch on the purpose of this study. So as many of you may be aware, across the county, the library facilities are owned by our partners, being either the local municipality or the school board in some cases. And so the suitable facility for library service is provided by our partners. The service is provided by the county. And I'm joined tonight by our manager of library services, Darlene Koch, is online with us as well. Darlene oversees the library service, and our portion includes the hiring of staff, the purchasing of materials, furnishings, shelving, delivery through a courier van service that goes across the county. So that's really the division of responsibilities between the two partners, the county and our local municipalities. That arrangement has been in place since 1989. So the study provided an opportunity to review that, 30 plus year agreement to really take a look at, has it been effective, and where do we go over the next 10 years? So it looks at a long-term planning horizon through to 2031, and examines the number and types of libraries that will be required through to 2031, and actions that really need to be taken to ensure that we're meeting the needs and expectations of our residents within the spaces that we have. So the project timeline and the approach, the process began last summer with an analysis of demographics, so community profiles. We looked at population growth. Petrolia certainly is a growth community, as was touched upon by the last presenter. It looked at case studies from other library systems as well to examine them for best practices. We had consultations with library staff and also key staff within your municipality. We met with CAO Rick Charlebois and David Menzies, the Director of Parks, Recreation and Facilities. We also conducted branch tours across the whole library system. And from there, the consultants did a space assessment of each library. They looked at policies, they looked at best practice and design guidance in terms of where do we go from here. And finally, as I mentioned, presented in January to County Council. So just a little bit about the Lambton County Library System. As I mentioned, the county delivers service through 25 branches. And we talked about that arrangement between the municipalities and the county. We have it's actually closer to 20,000 active cardholders in 2023. So we've increased our cardholders over time. They borrow about 330,000 physical materials. Of those 20,000 active cardholders, about 1,350 people identify your Petrolia Library branch as their home branch. And about 28% of those primary users are actually from Enniskillen. So it services not only the town of Petrolia, but the surrounding area as well. There's estimated about 12,000 visits each week to county libraries. And when we look at Petrolia specifically, it is among the 25 libraries, it's the 6th highest number of average weekly visits out of all the Lambton County library branches. So it's quite an active branch. Recent survey that we conducted in 2019 showed that about half of Lambton County residents visited a county library in 2018 and 19, just before the survey was done. So these libraries are very actively used. At the end of the process, the consultant noted that across the library system, there is about 87,817 square feet of library space in Lambton County. That amounts to about 0.7 square feet per person, and that's directly in line with provincial guidelines. So that's the approach that was taken in terms of, this isn't an arbitrary assessment as to whether or not the library space is suitable or not suitable. It looks at how much space should we have to meet provincial guidelines. And then when we look at growth projections over the next 10 years, how much space per person, per square foot will be needed. And that's the evaluation it takes. In terms of the notable trends that were identified through this review, obviously libraries are much more than just books on shelves. That may have been true in 1989 when the arrangement was set in place, but now libraries are places where people can access technology, not just computers and access to the internet and printers and resume building and word processing, but beyond that, technology like makerspace and 3D printers, new technology that supports the economy and new emerging trends in the economy. There are also places where the community comes together, especially post-pandemic. There's social spaces where people can gather and reconnect. We are looking at ensuring that our designs over the next 10 years welcome all people, that they meet AODA and accessibility requirements. They bridge that digital divide, making sure that our entire community, including our rural community, where there may be areas of that are underserved in terms of connectivity, and also making sure that the designs for our spaces are evolving to manage the diverse needs of our user base. So this slide is probably the focus for tonight. It talks about basically the needs in Lambton County. And when we look at the population, we know that Lambton County's population will grow from its current 128,000. It's forecasted to grow to about 138,500 people by 2031. And when we look specifically at Petrolia, so in the full study that's available online, there is a section dedicated to Petrolia that notes that Petrolia's population is projected to grow. The consultant looked at StatsCan data, looked at your own local data, indicating that the census population in 2021 of 6,013 is expected to grow to about 7,400 residents by the year 2031. And when we look at that and think back to this per square foot, 0.7 square foot per capita, we know that there will be an increased demand for space for Petrolia. The challenge with the Petrolia site, although it's small, it is a heritage building. It's a building that is well loved by the community because of its heritage value as a historic train station, and it really doesn't allow for expansion. So although technically Petrolia is poised for growth, population growth, and the study might recommend increased square footage for its library, it also recognizes that it's a beautiful building that has recently seen a significant investment on the part of the town, and it really doesn't have a logical place to expand. So instead, I think that the shift in focus would be, how can we bring the library outside of the four walls of the library? Spilling out into the market space. You've got a beautifully positioned library alongside your market. We're very close to the Victoria Hall, so there's programming opportunity within that space as well. So instead of looking to increase the square footage of the library, it's value it for the gem that it is, and look at creative ways to allow the library to spill out into the community by working closely with their partners at looking at some of the other spaces. I think generally the study also noted that there are accessibility challenges. Some of the spaces are undersized and the full range of services can't be sought, but we were able to address a number of those accessibility challenges through a recent renovation, and I'll touch on that a little bit later when we talk about what's taken place over the last couple of years. So the general recommendations of the study for all libraries, not just Petrolia, the recommendations to council were to adopt a library facility classification system that aligns with RUPLO guidelines, and the RUPLO guidelines is a provincial standard based on the Administrators of Rural and Urban Public Libraries of Ontario. So that was adopted as part of the study in January by County Council. The next step, we were directed by County Council to develop a facility standards policy to make sure that we're working with our municipal partners to address accessibility challenges, to look at what should the minimum standards be within each of our library facilities. And we'll take that back to your staff team and through them to you as part of a next step. We also, the other recommendation was that any major projects, which wouldn't necessarily apply in this community, but any major projects should of course involve consultation with elected officials, decision makers, community partners, and the public where appropriate. Spaces should be made welcoming to Indigenous communities as well, and we should be factoring that into the design and engagement. We should also be advocating for accessibility, working with our municipal partners to update exterior and interior signage to increase awareness among the public. And that's something that could still take place within the town of Petrolia, really enhancing the visibility of the library and making it clear to newcomers or visitors that the space is a library. And then just building on the coverage of existing libraries by exploring alternative library service arrangements, as I mentioned previously. So the next few slides are based on improving existing libraries, and they really relate to other communities. So I won't spend time on those, but you're certainly willing to go through the report at your leisure and take a look at what's being recommended in some of the other communities where we are identifying specific improvements. A lot of the square footage expansion is being made up in the community of Sarnia, where they're looking to expand the Brights Grove Library and relocate Mall Road Library to Clearwater. And then there's also expansion recommended in Kamlaki, and that will bring us to that 2031 projected square footage requirement. So finally, in terms of implementing the Joint Library Facilities Review, as I mentioned, County Council has adopted the facility classification system. Our next step is to evaluate each library facility in accordance with the facility standards policy. And I think I'll touch on this in a moment, but we're a bit ahead of that with Petrolia. We've already evaluated that facility and looked to make improvements. And then also to work with those communities to evaluate budgets and look at what next steps are to make those improvements. So I'll pause there and I'll just sort of jump in on what has been done at Petrolia. So those who were on the previous term of council will be familiar with a very generous bequest that was made to the County of Lambton with the intention of utilizing it specifically at the Petrolia Library. And that bequest was made by Otto and Kathleen Cunningham Schult. Otto Schult, upon his death, provided a bequest of over $440,000 to the County of Lambton with the condition that would be utilized to enhance the Petrolia Library, which gave us a tremendous opportunity to sit down with your staff team and to connect through County Council with elected officials as well to talk about how can we utilize this funding moving forward, not just for the county, for the library service delivery, but for the local municipal partner as well. And over the last couple of years, I think initially there was some more critical building issues that were addressed to the tune of about $30,000. And last year, another $70,000 was invested in major interior renovations to the space. Interior renovations that addressed many of the things that have been identified for a lot of the other libraries in this study, such as accessibility. We purchased a new accessible service counter that the town of Petrolia arranged for the sanding of the floor. We painted the entire branch. We introduced some new shelving, some new computer workstations, refurbished the children's area, updated carpeting. So the branch really does look quite brand new, and we celebrated that opening last June with Mayor Loosely, and I know a number of others on council were in attendance. And that has been a significant step forward in making this branch accessible to the community, but also a welcoming place to be, and enhancing the floor plan to allow for other uses within the space as well. So we look forward to continuing to work with the town of Petrolia on next steps in terms of implementing that fund and offering valued library services to your residents. So thank you for your time this evening, Your Worship, and happy to take any questions that your council may have.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Meyer. I certainly appreciate that detailed report, and I just want to make a couple comments before I turn it over to council. That grant left, or that money left to the community for the library, is terrific news for us. And what the work that was done last year is, as you said, was great, and again at no cost to the taxpayers. But the other thing I want to share with the members too is, when I first saw the report at County Council, I saw all these changes and recommendations, and I didn't see Petrolia listed. And it was really nice to say, well, Petrolia hasn't got a lot of those, has no issues. We're really pleased with the way it's set up. So just for council's information, it was really nice that the consultant informed me, you don't have any issues there. So it was, that was good news. Anyway, I'll stop there and open it up to council. Any questions for Mr. Meyer regarding his verbal report? And as you know, too, Mr. Meyer, council did receive a copy of your report already, so they've already had that. Any questions? If not, Mr. Meyer, thank you for coming to address council. And again, I appreciate you with this last minute change with the weather, and it was a great report, so thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, members of council. All the best.
Okay, moving on. We'll go on to, I have Mr. Spadafora from Baker Tilly Sarney LLP, and I'll ask Mandy to try and bring him in for his report, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and he's just in the loading zone.
Okay.
I believe we're all set, Your Worship.
Thank you. Mr. Spadafora, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Good,
Everyone hear
thank
me?
you. Listen, thank you. I certainly want to welcome you, and I'll turn the meeting over to you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Council. Yeah, just been wanting to do a bit of an update here. Sorry, I just got to bring up my package. So, I believe in front of you there's a couple items, a couple of engagement letters for some work that we're going to be doing for some grant applications, or some follow through on some grants that were done, and then some discussion around some new standards for auditing. So first I'll start with the audit standards, and there's a bit of a presentation, not quite really, just a couple slides. Not sure if I should share my screen here, maybe if I'm allowed to.
You sure can.
Okay, good. All right. Perfect. Screen 2, there we go. Okay, so just quickly here, what's kind of been passed there last year and into this year for these audits happening in 2022. Canada-wide standard change, so not just PSAB or anything like that, not-for-profit world, it's really any audit across Canada. You can see in there in the first sentence, so all entities, regardless of size and complexity, are following a new set of not a new set of whole standards, but a new set of standards along the lines of control work and identifying the financial statement preparation process, the IT infrastructure and the technology system around preparing the financial statements and journal entries themselves. So really kind of drilling down on some of those key areas as part of the audit planning and controlled environment testing that's done. So the first page is just kind of, just some really marketing to some degree, but just suggesting that these revisions are intended to clarify the requirements and enhance that risk identification and assessment process. And it really tries to bring together between management, the auditors, and those with governance, which would be council, establishing maybe more lines of communication, or as auditors through management, having that discussion with council to really identify and see where any risks that might be coming out, whether due to the audit or just through month to month work that's been done, if there's any risks that there is some process for mitigating. So just kind of some bullet points here as to what will specifically be affected. So the few standard changes here, so enhanced requirements for understanding the system of internal control. As you know, there was the internal control policy documents that were that was passed last year and implemented, and now for 2023 kind of implemented for the whole year, which is great. So it's something that we're going to be able to do, is rely on those controls a little more as part of the whole audit process. But as you can see there, after the first requirement, increasing the focus and understanding of assessing the overall control environment, monitoring controls by management, as well as the financial statement preparation process and communication that takes place within the entity. That's a big word, is that communication, the governance piece provided by council and communicating any risk, but also how does that translate to the financial statements and work that's done throughout the year. So where we get involved is more documentation as part of the year-end process, more identification that needs to be more identification that's needed for part of the control environment assessment work. And all of that will be done with the management group there in order to get all the detail that we need. The second bullet point is that enhanced requirement for understanding of information technology as it relates to the audit. That's now been incorporated across the risk assessment process, not just kind of shelved on its own thing. So we'll be asking a little more around the to get that detail for various applications and systems relevant to the financial reporting function. And in some cases, it says here, we may request to speak to those. So like if there's an IT person directly, or if there's an IT team that's working to maintain the network infrastructure to really get a handle as to risk mitigation strategies around information technology as a whole throughout the organization, but also specific to financial reporting process. And then that third point, specific areas that have been identified where controls must be assessed as whether they're designed appropriately and implemented. We've always been doing that, but just to a more of an extent, essentially based on this standard. We will be asking for additional information to support our procedures in determining whether controls are implemented. And in some cases, which we've somewhat already done with the town of Petrolia late last year, is observe controls. So this last little bit here, identifying and assessing risks that have changed, and there's a new scale. We're getting into the weeds a little bit here, so I don't want to get too technical, but inherent risk and control risk are what make up the risk of material misstatement and statements. What they've done is adopted from international standards now a likelihood and magnitude on a spectrum basis for these risks occurring. So we're assessing them beyond just if they do exist, but now what is the likelihood and magnitude of those risks. So the specific categories and risk factors will require some more documentation in the file, driven by our understanding of the municipality's operations and any changes that might happen year to year, and the financial reporting considerations as well. So we will discuss these areas of focus and increased risk with you in the management group, and more risk could be identified as a result of these additional requirements. And we can always see one or two more that have already been part of the process here, but this assessment spectrum does scale for really any type of job, and so we are using that process as part of this new standard as well. What we did want to say here is, what are we doing to ensure this compliance? Make sure your statements have this additional work a part of it, but also what we're doing at Baker Tilly. So we've attended a few training sessions. We've leaned on our national office a couple times actually in these last couple weeks to really help us understand the impact of the work that needs to be performed. Of course, we don't want to overkill anything, but we do have to maintain our standards. Our audit tools have been updated through our templating to facilitate the gathering of the information that we need to. And we've amended our audit planning list to include additional documentation requirements, a few of those things that have already been passed along to staff to get us for this audit. So what I did want to also communicate is that there is a marginal increase to the fees for 2022 to include this additional work. We wanted to disclose that and be transparent about that. What I've suggested here, based on what I expect to be potential additional time for adopting these new standards, a fee increase of no more than $1,500. So did want to be transparent about that for the council to discuss. And those are the slides on that one. I guess I can stop sharing on that. So I'm not sure if there's any discussion or any questions around that before I move into the other two items.
I'll just ask council briefly, do you have any questions regarding that first portion? If not, I see none, so please continue on.
Okay, so the next piece is two engagement letters. I hope they're in front of you. Actually, I can bring one up. It's just a really detailed approach to a couple of engagements we're going to be doing in order to satisfy the requirements for assurance engagements needed for these grants that came from the province, from the specific ministry, the Ministry of heritage, sport, tourism, culture industries as represented by Her Majesty the Queen. So for 2021 and 2022, we have all the specific wording we needed. I did work with the representative from the ministry just to make sure that all the wording in the engagement letter is appropriate. She was happy with that. I did want to also bring this to council for, again, transparency and making it clear that there is additional work that we're going to be doing. We don't have to do an audit. We are just going to do a review, which does bring the level of work down, which is great. We've already started into 21 and getting the information for 22 together. So we're in a good spot there. It is a requirement to release this, the additional funds that that did come up recently. So I guess I'm looking for an endorsement of those engagement letters to from council to I guess approve the work that needs to be done, and so we can continue and finish that off and have that ready for council to approve the actual work done and send those off to the ministry.
All right, thank you, Mr. Spadfora. Before we approve the motion to endorse that, I'll just ask council, do you have any questions regarding his report? Councillor Welsh.
I did ask the CAO and Larissa about this because I'd never seen this type of letter before associated with a grant application. And it does seem to be specific to this reconnect or this type of requirement, I guess, for a grant application. And it does seem to be kind of specific to this grant.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wells. Any other questions from council? If not, then I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder to endorse his verbal report. And I just wanted to let Mr. Spadfora know that council did receive copies of your report here. So I'll ask for a mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Field. And I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do believe that is for the Council of Town of Petrolia to approve endorsement of the engagement letters with Baker Tilly as presented by Giovanni Spadafora this evening.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. And Mr. Spadfora, thank you for coming to address council under these circumstances at the last minute.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to community announcements, recognitions, and awards. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that motion on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Patel, seconded by Councillor Clark. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to receive as information only the February 27th, 2023 community announcements as presented.
I'll just ask Ms. Smith, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Your Worship, this is Larissa. I have nothing to add at this time. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right. All those in favor of that motion? Opposed? That motion carries. That brings us for the first opportunity for the public to address council. I'll ask Mrs. Pearson, do we have anyone wishing to address council?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we did not receive anybody in advance of registration. So at this time, I would just ask that if members of our attendees would like to raise your bionic hand, we will form a speakers list from that. So that's just located where there's the raise your hand either symbol or saying. So we'll give you a few minutes to find that symbol if you wish, and then I can form a speakers list from there. Your Worship, it does appear at this time we do not have anyone wishing to address council.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. That'll move us on to the financial accounts report. That's being deferred to the next meeting of council. The next item on here is the report from the CAO treasurer regarding the development charges study. I'll ask for a motion to put that on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Welch. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to adopt the report of the CAO Treasurer dated 27 of February 2023, and that Council authorize the use of BM Ross to conduct the development charges study, and that Council authorize the cost of the development charges study to be funded by the Working and Capital Reserve.
Thank you. Any discussion from council? Councillor O'Hara.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of development charges to start with. And I believe this study is going to cost us, like the taxpayers, I think $29,000 or something around that number. And that would have to be redone in 10 years. And probably you can figure on doubling or tripling that cost in 10 years. I'm not so sure that this is a wise move to spend taxpayers' money. You know, we've always tried to, you know, encourage development in the town of Petrolia. We've tried to work with developers. We've tried to work with industry. And by adding, like, this is nothing short of a tax when we get development charges. It's a tax on the developer that will be carried over to the person that buys the home. It makes the home that much more expensive, whether it's 10,000, 15,000, or whatever we decide as a council. So I want council to really think about that. Do we want that? I thought we wanted to encourage development, not discourage it.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I do support this. I feel that we're about 5 months behind in getting this done. When it did come up before, I wish we had looked at it. I definitely want to save the taxpayers of Petrolia, the residents of Petrolia, money as well. That's why I feel that this is timely. We need to do this. If we put a oversized pump in for a new development, that comes from the taxpayers. If we have to build new roads to get to some of these developments, if we need to buy a new fire truck, a new snowplow, because of the future development that's going to go in the southeast quadrant alone, we're going to need more equipment. I think it's important to look at this. I don't think development in Plimpton, Wyoming is decreasing. They have it. It's not decreasing in Lambton Shores. They have it. It's not decreasing in St. Clair. They have it. So I really don't believe that this is going to discourage. It was something that was talked about during the election, and I think a number of people did endorse and did support it. I just hope that we look at this now and that we move forward. I want to save the taxpayers money, and I feel that some of this development needs to pay for that development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Field. Any other comments from council? Councillor Wells.
Yes, we did hear a lot about property taxes and waste and water charges on residents during our most recent budget deliberations. And development charges can help ease that property tax burden and the wastewater charges in spite of the additional changes and restrictions. We can craft the development charges bylaw as we want to for our own municipality. In spite of those changes and restrictions, we still have a lot of control over how we develop the development charges bylaw. And municipalities have, as we know, have very few revenue generating tools beyond property taxation. And I think this is an opportunity for us to raise the necessary revenue to increase our infrastructure that's coming now with our new developments. And even as most recently noted with libraries, I mean, it will cover charges for a lot of those things.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Councillor O'Hara.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate, you know, this is nothing short of a tax. That's what it is. It's a tax on developers, which will be carried over to homeowners. And if you stop and think about it, sure, it looks like a cash cow for the consultants to do the study and for the town of Petrolia, but stop and think about it. If we had the subdivisions ready to go, which we don't, but if it cut down the building of houses by 50%, think of how much tax base you lose by not getting those houses built because we raised the price through a tax.
Thank you, Councilor O'Hara. I want to mention, I have some reservations only to the point for those that can remember a number of years back when we had hardly any development. We didn't have any building permit fees or impost or what it is, development fees, they call it today, which was something that enticed people to build, and some of the development that's happened over the last number of years has been going on for years because we did something to try and entice developers to come to our town. Anyway, I'll stop there. Councilor O'Hara, one last time. Go ahead.
Just one last time. And you know, going back, I hate going back in years, but going back in years when yourself and me negotiated Waterville to come to Petrolia, if we'd have put a hefty fee on them to come to Petrolia, they'd have been somewhere else. And you know that as well as I do, because it took negotiation after negotiation. And you stop and think about how much tax they have paid to the town of Petrolia that we could have lost if they weren't here because of development fees.
Thank you, Councilor O'Hara. All right, Councilor Field.
Just one last comment. I did a rough calculation of the potential homes that we're looking at. It's potentially $11 million if $10,000 per house on the lots that we have to build. So as we grow, if we were able to potentially get, and I'm not saying $10,000 is it, we don't know what the answer is because we've never done the study. We've never got the information. $29,000 is pretty good if we could bring in millions of dollars that could help us with future development. That could help us pay for the next fire truck if we need to get another one, or if we need to get another snowplow. So I just think that other municipalities are not collapsing. I don't think we need to be the highest. I think we need to get the study done to understand what we don't know right now. We're making a lot of judgment calls without having the facts. So.
Thank you, Councilor Field. And again, as stated earlier, that whatever the study comes in on, we can reduce the fee to whatever we want as long as we do not exceed it. But anyway, I guess I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion before you. Oh, sorry.
I'd request a recorded vote on the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councilor O'Hara's requested a recorded vote. Mrs. Pearson, when you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. That'll just take me 1 second to formulate. Just for those that are aware, for our new members of council, I'm not sure if we've had a recorded vote yet with this term of council. So with the recorded vote, the mayor does have the final cast of the vote. The requester of the recorded vote has the second vote, and then we go in alphabetical order through the other remaining councillors. So our first councillor who will vote, and it is for or against, obviously for is in support of, against is not in support of, will be Councillor Clark. So Councillor Clark, for or against?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hyatt, for or against?
For.
Councillor Field, for or against?
For.
Councillor Patel, for or against?
For.
Councillor Welsh, for or against?
For.
Then we will go to yourself, Councillor O'Hara, for or against?
Against.
And Your Worship, would you wish to cast a ballot? We do have 6 and 4 and 1 against. So you're for or against, please.
I'm against.
That does carry, Your Worship, 5-2, 71% is a carried motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on. We have a report from the CAO Treasurer regarding the town of Petrolia's budget for 2023 approval. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Clark. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to adopt the report of the CAO Treasurer dated the 27th of February, 2023, and that the 2023 budget be approved as circulated. And I apologize, I should say circulated.
Okay, so noted. All right, any discussion from council? I had concerns of it being at 3%, but under the circumstances, I can live with that. Seeing none from council, I'll ask Mr. Charlebois, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, Your Worship, just like to remind council that this is the end of our budget process. It's about and so you count it 4 to 6 months. And we normally are at this stage at the first council meeting in December. We've progressed to the stage where we seek council's approval before the actual budget year starts. We're a couple of months behind due to the election, but normally it's done in December. Thank you, Your Worship.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Okay, if I see there's no other hands up, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of approving the budget? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Water and wastewater. We have a report from the Director of Operations regarding Buttermilk Creek Distribution Waterline Repair, quote approval. And I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that motion on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Hyatt, seconded by Councillor Clark. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
Thank you. And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to adopt the report of the Director of Operations dated February 27th, 2023, regarding quote results for the emergency repair of the distribution line at Buttermilk Creek, and that Clark Construction Incorporated be awarded the repair in the amount of $54,000 plus HST.
Any discussion from council? Mr. Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll call the vote. All those, oh, sorry, Councillor Welsh?
I was just wondering if we knew the cause of the break. Is it just age, or was there something that happened?
Mr. Thompson, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Welsh, I believe it's age, Councillor Welsh. I talked to a retired foreman, and we've had one break west of Buttermilk Creek probably 15, 20 years ago. And then 3 years ago, we had a break just east of Buttermilk Creek, just in front of that house that's back there. The tie-in is going to go past that point, and then also past the point on the west side. Larry was able to pinpoint where that was. So I think it's just the age of the infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, you're okay with that, Councillor Welsh? Okay, thank you. All right. All those in favor of that motion? Opposed? That motion carries. And we have a report from the Director of Operations regarding performance acceptance for Greenwood Acres Phase 1. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor O'Hara, seconded by Councillor Patel. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that would be that the Council of the Town of Petrolia adopt the report of the Director of Operations regarding Phase 1 of Greenwood Estates development for performance acceptance, and that the Council of the Town of Petrolia approve performance acceptance for Phase 1 of the Greenwood Estates development, and that the 2-year warranty period for the municipal servicing of Phase 1 come into effect as of February 27th, 2023.
Any discussion from council? Seeing none, Mr. Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. And moving on in administration, we have a report from the Clerk Operations Clerk regarding Ontario Provincial Police follow-up to the education session request for calls. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that motion on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Hyatt. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to receive the report of the Clerk Operations Clerk dated February 27th, 2023, regarding the requested follow-up information for policing costs and calls for service.
Thank you. And I just want to state that I am pleased to see that report. It certainly answered my question. So I'll ask Mrs. Pearson to pass that on to the police and whoever prepared that report.
Certainly, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion from council? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. And we have an item deferred from February the 13th, 2023 regular council meeting. A report from Jessica Smith, Executive Assistant Deputy Clerk regarding the lottery update for 2022. And you have a motion before you. I'll ask for mover and a seconder to put that on the floor for discussion, please. Moved by Councillor Patel, seconded by Councillor Welsh. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to endorse the report of the Deputy Clerk dated February 13th, 2023 regarding lottery update for the year 2022, and that the Council of the Town of Petrolia continue to waive the 3% license fee eligible through provincial policy, and the lottery licensing eligibility review fee of $200 annually be added to the municipal fee schedule.
Any questions from council? Ms.
Your
Smith,
worship.
oh, sorry, Councillor Hyatt, go ahead.
I would just like to raise, I'm in favor of waiving the 3% fee, but I'm not sure at this point if implementing the $200 is really, in the best interest of the community. I think these service groups and support the community quite broadly. They do a lot for our community already. So really, the town asking for this $200 fee, which most likely is going back to the town in another manner anyways to support the residents, is really required at this point. Give them the training, help them with the lottery license application, see if they can be successful. If not, maybe revisit at another time.
Thank you, Councillor Hyatt. Any other discussion? Ms. Smith, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Your worship, per Jessica, she is having microphone concerns.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if Clerk Mandy Pearson had a chance to say that as of yet, but Mandy may be able to help in lieu of.
Mrs. Pearson, do
yes.
you have anything you'd like to add?
No, actually, we don't, your worship. We wanted to make it just apparent to council some of the concerns, and obviously that fee is a provincial and we are guided under the province. So I do believe that that information has been distributed and explained. So I don't, to my knowledge, I personally have nothing else to add, and I do know that Jess explained and put into her presentation with no additions. So I do see also, though, we have two other items, your worship, just in case you didn't see those flash up while I was speaking.
Sorry, what was that? Two other items?
Two other, Councillor Welsh and Councillor Field.
Oh, yes, yeah, no, I'm going to see them. I just wanted to mention, yeah, that information was sent out to all of council, but I'll just go ahead. Councillor Field, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, your worship. Well, I guess my question would be through you to Councillor Hyatt, was he making an amendment to remove the $200 instead of defeating this with it still in there? I just was unclear if he was asking to have it removed.
We can certainly do an amendment. Is Councillor Hyatt, is that your choice to amend the motion by deleting the $200?
Yeah, that would be my proposal. Yes, please.
Okay, so that's moved. I'll need a seconder for that amendment.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Joel Field. So I will ask the clerk to read that motion as amended, and we're going to vote on just the amendment first. So Mrs. Pearson, just read the amendment only, please.
Thank you. So that would be to amend the motion on the floor that would remove the $200 annual eligibility review fee.
Any discussion from council? Is everyone clear? So we're just voting on the amendment only. Councillor Wells.
I'm just wondering if possibly the clerk could elaborate a bit on rough amounts of time that are spent with the clerk and the assistant deputy clerk with these organizations, or putting all of this information together for them.
Mrs. Pearson.
Certainly through you, your worship.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, so when a start to finish of an application, from the point an application reaches our offices to review, to ensuring their compliance, and that's just for applications, that process should take about 30 minutes tops, as long as everything is tip top in the application supplied. We have yet to have applications supplied with all information, so we do a lot of chasing, which is not a problem. That is what our office is for. There's also the other component of the responsibility we have to the province, which is ensuring that the bank accounts are properly documented, standalone, that all of their eligibility paperwork and their qualifying documents, along with their intents and purposes of the lottery funds, are being followed. That usually takes about 2 hours annually per group. And then there is the component that is the reporting. So after we have issued a license, the reporting needs to come back, and then we need to file and reconcile the reporting. Again, if all is done with no concerns, that's a half an hour process to reconcile and file and move that on to the province. When we don't get that consistent through the province's regulated components, we then have to go back to the organizations and get that additional support. And it is quite difficult at times to source that additional support. This past, we always focus in early winter on these items because they are something that comes renew in December, and there's a lot of elements that come forward with it. Right now, Jessica is spending upwards of 4 hours per day on lottery to chase and reconcile and explain.
Wow. Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. Councillor O'Hara.
Yeah, you know, I really support the service clubs and whoever's running a lottery. That's great, the things they do. But, you know, I think they're getting a bargain at $200. But from what I've just heard here, you know, I can't support the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion from council? All right, you've heard the motion. We're voting just on the amendment to delete the $200. I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment? 1, 2, 3. Opposed? 1, 2, 3. And I'm opposed. So that amendment will not carry. We'll go back to the original motion. Any discussion on the original motion? So Mandy, we have that mover and seconder, is that correct?
Correct. It's moved by Councillor Patel, seconded by Councillor Welsh.
All those in favor of that motion? Opposed? That motion carries. I'm just going to say to Councillor Welsh, you've got a very small picture, so it's hard for me to see if your hand goes up or not. If you could just make sure your hand goes right in front of your face. Thank you. All right. Moving on to the Fire Emergency Management and Public Safety. We have a report from the Director of Public Safety, CMC, and Fire Chief regarding a tender for the SCBA decontamination washer. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put that motion on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor O'Hara, seconded by Councillor Hyatt. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion.
Thank you, Your Worship, and that is for the Council of the Town of Petrolia to adopt the report of the Director of Public Safety and Fire Chief dated the 27th day of February, 2023 regarding the SCBA decontamination washer tenders, and that the tender be awarded to Canadian Safety Equipment Limited in the amount of $42,325 excluding HST.
Thank you. All right, any discussion from council regarding that motion before you? Chief Arns, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do, Your Worship. Thank you. Just want to point out an opportunity here to, firefighters are at a higher risk of cancers, you know, for our occupational exposures that we are exposed to. And with the help of councils in the past, current council and fire committee, we've been able to significantly reduce that risk through purchasing new equipment and operating procedures. And this kit will certainly go to help continue on that path of making our firefighters safer. And you know, minimize the contact with contaminants and potentially minimize the risk for cancers future in life.
Thank you, Chief Arns. I'll just ask one more time, any questions from council? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. We do not have anything for a closed session or in camera. That moves us to the second opportunity for the public to address council. I'll ask Mrs. Pearson, do we have anyone registered?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I did look at my email. I have nobody who has emailed. So again, I'm just going to go to our attendee list. We still have 4 attendees of the public into the meeting. So I'll just ask from those attendees, if you wish to address council, just raise your bionic hand. We'll definitely form a speakers list from that and be able to bring you forward from there. I'll just give that a last call, but barring none, Your Worship. And we do not have anyone, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. That brings us to new and unfinished business. We have 2 items. A, from Councillor Patel was in regards to crosswalks and crossovers. Further discussion held over from February 13th, 2023. I'll ask Councillor Patel, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to, revisit the conversation we had that there has been money added to the budget and that I just don't feel a second report is necessary. I think that we have enough information that we can move forward. Maybe it isn't 100% complete, but there's certainly enough information that we could act upon improving and expanding what we currently have for the safety of our community right now. And I hope that council will support that decision in order to move forward and make some adjustments before that there is items or incidents that we can't reverse.
So are you looking at moving a motion tonight to delete that second study?
I am.
All right, then I'll need a seconder before we get into discussion. Seconded by Councillor Field. All right, I'll ask the clerk to kind of read that motion if she would, please.
Absolutely, Your Worship. Just one moment.
No problem.
I believe, and Councillor Patel, I apologize. I have it here in front of me, but please tweak if I have it just a little out. And that is that the Council of the Town of Petrolia not proceed with a second sidewalk study, and that staff be directed to proceed with returning to council recommendations on implementing the original sidewalk study. I'm sorry, and I said sidewalk. I'm sorry, my brain's on sidewalks tonight. Crosswalks.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Patel?
It is.
And the seconder agrees with that, okay? All right. I'll open it up now for discussion. Any discussion regarding that motion regarding deleting the second study? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. And we do have B, we have a notice of motion from Deb Patel regarding creation of a youth advisory committee that will be brought forward on March 27th. And council has already received that. Moving on to bylaws. And I know it's been a busy night for everyone, and I appreciate your time and patience. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to have the bylaws read a first and second time, please. Moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor O'Hara. Any discussion regarding the 2 bylaws or the bylaws to be read a first and second time? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. I'll ask for a motion to have the bylaws read a third time, finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered, moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Field, and I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so that is for bylaw number 08 of 2023, being a bylaw of the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia to provide for various fees and charges in the Town of Petrolia, be read a third time and finally passed. That bylaw number 11 of 2023, being a bylaw of the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia to authorize the execution of an agreement between Caldwell First Nation and the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia to provide for fieldwork participation at the Breaksboro Water Treatment Plant, the intake line, be read a third time and finally passed. That bylaw number 12 of 2023, being a bylaw of the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia to confirm the resolutions and motions of the Council of the Town of Petrolia, which were adopted up to and including February February 27th, 2023 be read a third time and finally passed.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. Any questions from council regarding those bylaws? All those in favor of approving the bylaws? Opposed, that motion carries. And I'll ask for a motion to adjourn until our next regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Clark. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
And that is for the February 27th, 2023 meeting of the Council of the Town of Petrolia to be adjourned to the next regular scheduled meeting of council to be held on Monday, March 27th, 2023, or at call of the chair.
All those in favor? Opposed, that motion carries. And we've adjourned at 2 minutes after 9. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.